Young people have dreams and hopes for their future, and every parent can agree that what they want for their children is to be future ready, to have the skills and opportunities they will need to succeed in the future. Yet innovation is transforming the way we work and bringing into question how educators and schools can best prepare students given the uncertain future of work. The world of work is rapidly changing, and most of the jobs that will exist in 20 years haven't even been created yet. It's impossible to know the science and technological skills students will need to succeed in the future. Also, a point on entrepreneurship. There is a growing interest among youth, and it requires a different set of skills. What we know, including from business leaders and employers, is that to succeed in the future, students will need skills to set and achieve goals, skills to manage emotions in the face of uncertainty and challenge, skills to identify and build relationships with good mentors who can help them succeed when work changes, skills to understand the needs of others, including supervisors, clients, and customers, and to show respect for others from different backgrounds, skills to communicate and collaborate with others from diverse backgrounds and fields. All of these competencies are what social and emotional learning is designed to teach. The most universal employability skills are interpersonal ones: communication, self-awareness, personal management, and being able to work with and get along with others. These are the same skills taught in quality SEL lessons and programs. In fact, employers say they can teach new hires relevant science and technology, but what they can't teach and often struggle to find are the foundational skills, that social and emotional skills students will need for success. I am excited to introduce our new 5-part webisode series on this topic. In 2020, CASEL launched an initiative to strategically integrate social and emotional learning with career and workforce development. In partnership with 8 states, Delaware, Kansas, Nevada, North Dakota, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Utah, and Wisconsin, and the generous support of Pure Edge, Inc., we are identifying and elevating policies to address inequities in youth employment and engage in an economic revival.
So let's talk a little bit about the workplace learning skills that some people have called soft skills, and I prefer to refer to as essential skills. Now, in the P-TECH program, it's a strong academic program. So students have a focus on science and math and English and history, all of the classes that are significantly important to getting them their academic degree. But the way in which the curriculum is taught incorporates those essential skills or workplace skills. So problem-solving skills, collaborative skills, presentation skills, writing skills, which come up repeatedly in job descriptions for entry-level employees being hired by companies across the United States. So if you went into a math class, and one example I use in the book that I wrote, Breaking Barriers, was the math teacher, Jamala Sifal, who taught algebra to students in grade 10. And if you went into her class, she would teach algebra in the context of a project where students and teams were being asked to use their algebra skills in the creation of a business plan for a new company going in competition with Nike. So the students work around a table using their math skills, using their algebra to create their business case. Then they write it up, and you could see the business cases written all around the room. And then they have an opportunity to present as if they were presenting to potential investors. And what's important about it is that the workplace skills were not disconnected from the academics. It wasn't a freestanding skill set that students needed to understand separate from their academics. It was demonstrating and showing how teachers can incorporate those essential skills into how they teach any subject. And the same would be true if you went into a science class or you went into an English or a history class. Any academic subject, you can teach effectively the academic content consistent with the curriculum in a way that builds in those essential workplace skills.
Welcome to Webisode number 5 with Castle. This webisode is titled Integrating SEL with Career and Workforce Development to Ensure All Students Are Future Ready. Our focus today with this module is going to be exploring ways states can encourage high quality approaches for SEL and workforce preparation, including how best to create policies and guidance that meets the needs of different communities. I'm Damien Sweeney. I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging at the Kentucky Department of Education. And I am very excited to be joined by 2 guests from the Department of Education in Delaware. We're going to start with Dr. Teri Lawler. And Dr. Lawler is with the Delaware Department of Education Office of Equity and Innovation as an Education Associate, Trauma-Informed Practices and Social Emotional Learning. She is a school psychologist and was named Delaware School Psychologist of the Year in 2010. Not a surprise to me, she's incredible. She joined the Delaware Department of Ed in 2018 and leads the department's work on implementing trauma-informed practices and again, social emotional learning. In 2020, Dr. Lawler launched the Delaware Bridge Initiative to accelerate the integration of SEL and career and workforce development based on interest from the communities of leaders, educators, and partners across the state. Next, we have Luke Rhine. Luke was recently promoted to be the Associate Secretary of Workforce Support for the Delaware Department of Ed. He creates systems that focus on the intersection of people, careers, and communities. His work supports the K-12, higher education, and the workforce systems to establish policy, scale effective practices, and develop solutions that connect youth and adults with good jobs that provide a living wage. He's committed to creating a culture of equity and inclusivity and supports the department's vision of every learner ready for success in college, career, and life. He has also worked as a high school CTE teacher and middle school teacher.
Thank you for having us, and also wonderful to hear how esteemed my colleague is.
Appreciate the warm introduction. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today and to just join our distinguished panel.
All right, Luke and Dr. Lawler, let's jump right in. So Delaware has many examples of upholding high quality practices and honoring equity in multiple policy efforts. How do you recommend states and others start engaging in the process of integrating these approaches into their workforce efforts to include CTE and OST program providers?
I think where we started was really from a foundation of a mutual desire to see young people have opportunities that allowed them to pursue passionately their interests, and then also to live with purpose. The intent of all of our work in developing opportunities for college and career readiness is the understanding that, SEL is a foundation for life. And we want young people to be able to understand and explore their own emotions, but also live cohesively in communities where we're able to do perspective taking and demonstrate social awareness to build stronger, more resilient landscapes for everyone. And so to do that, we have to work collaboratively, and that foundation and that desire to cultivate sort of a culture of care for everyone becomes a springboard for every policy decision.
Teri and I spend quite a bit of time with the community. So the community represents young people, it represents adult learners, it represents folks in our community-based organizations, as well as our employer network. And collectively, what we are really charged with is helping young people to build an identity. So a strong sense of self, a strong sense of purpose, knowledge of who that young person is and wants to become, particularly in context of their community, the the school environment, and potentially, their future occupation. And what's really important is that we center the young person in our decision making and in our policy. And that starts with a commitment to equity, that starts with a commitment to inclusivity in terms of both a strategic objective, but also just a sense of purpose for our work. That work is internal, that work is external, and then that work influences policy. And what I think is really important, and where Teri and where Delaware has been particularly successful, is the work shows up in many different things. So it shows up in our programmatic policy and the way that we support schools, the way that we build relationships with community partners and employers. It shows up in our fiscal policy. It shows up in our accountability models. And it's essentially, we need to talk the talk and kind of walk the walk. So it needs to be present in each aspect of our work, but it also needs to be on the tip of our tongue in terms of how we build relationships and how we advocate for young people and how we build a system that kind of blurs the line between K-12 higher ed and the workforce, and again, that centers the young person in the way that we do our craft.
Thank you. So there are a few things that you mentioned that I just want to touch on. I feel like these things will really help other states as they begin this journey or continue this journey. How do you begin building relationships with community stakeholders? How do you even start the conversation? How do you get in the doors? This can be with businesses. This can be with faith-based organizations. This can be with universities. But what do you all do in Delaware that helps just open the door?
We're fortunate to live in a state that's geographically smaller, but also we have really embodied a spirit of collaboration. And so it's been really interesting to see, particularly in the SEL space, how a lot of the initial work started as grassroots. So it was an outcry from the community initially to build in more opportunities for youth development and social competence within our classrooms. And a Rodale landscape analysis really launched the work and the application process with Castle. Once the work was more formalized under the Department of Education, we didn't change that paradigm. We embraced the opportunity, recognizing that our schools are but one environment where young people are developing and hopefully thriving. We need to expand the village. And to do that, every community member can be a part of that work. Often in our youth work, we will say, we don't want nothing for us without us. So we want our youth at the table, but at the same time, we need kids. Schools can't do it alone, and kids benefit from having lots of loving arms wrapped around them. And so we, in all of our work, look for opportunities to link arms with partners so that we can wrap supports around children and youth.
I knew we were kindred spirits before this, but now I really know because you just mentioned my favorite quote. The quote is, "Nothing about us without us is for us." And so to that sentiment, I remember having this visionary commissioner in Kentucky, and I went to him as the program coordinator for comprehensive school counseling, and I said, our counselor to student ratios are too high. I need to help change this. I've got all these statistics. And he said, whoa, slow down. He said, policymakers, they will look at the statistics, but what they really need to hear are stories from our students.
So I'm happy to, Damien, use the example of how we provide, student advisement and coaching, and really look at and try to address our school counselor ratio. So Teri and I are both serving on Rethinking Middle Grades Committee. They're half of the committee are external partners in terms of community agents, employers. The other half are really made up of parents, students, educators, and many different levels in terms of our occupations that exist within the education sector. But to your point, Damien, there is a 10th grade student who is engaged on the committee. There's a recent graduate that's engaged on the committee. and there is a future educator. So the individual is in their junior year of an ed prep program that is engaged in the committee. And this is a committee of 25 stakeholders who really want to produce change as we think about middle grades instruction. One of the core tasks that this committee will solve is how we think about student advisement and coaching. And there are several barriers that we will have to address. One of which is the staffing model for school counselors and the way in which we allocate time in terms of direct support to young people in a multi-tiered system of supports. So recognizing that all young people need some level of support that helps to build identity, that helps to build social awareness and competence, and helps to empower them in terms of both voice and advocacy and just really the aspect, the assertion of who they want to become. And then there are additional supports that are needed for young people who have and may need, additional arms around them, additional high fives in the hallway, whatever it may be. And I think you have to be deliberate in the way in which you build stakeholder groups, the way in which you seek to elevate voice, and in this instance particularly, part of elevating student voice isn't just making sure that the individual is in the room, it's also making sure that they're equipped to speak in the room. So part of our charge with this committee and the 3 young people that are represented, we're also working with them in terms of a coaching model so that when they speak with confidence, they speak with candor, and they speak their truth, because that is what we collectively need to hear and elevate.
The very same coaching strategies that they're using, we're also building into other youth voice opportunities that are taking place throughout the state. And I think a really unique thing that the department did a number of years ago is try to cultivate more of an enabling context for the adults who are receiving on the receiving end of the youth voice. So with that, we've extended professional learning and capacity building beyond our educators to out-of-school time providers, community-based organizations, other youth-serving agencies within our state, so that we are all operating with similar lenses and, speaking, as Luke said previously, we're really practicing what we preach. We're walking the talk.
And I can imagine, Dr. Lawler, with your background in trauma-informed practices and social emotional learning, that those are 2 major concepts that you're working with those outside organizations and adults outside of education on. Is that right?
Correct. Our hope is for every one of our community members to understand the neuroscience of trauma and toxic stress, and more importantly, focus on resilience and building protective factors so young people can move past, challenging experiences to really operate with strong coping skills and thrive.
That's amazing. And now that, as kind of the frame around this conversation is CTE and workforce development, much of what you're talking about in terms of preparing folks for trauma-informed practices, making sure they are trauma-informed, making sure they do have a proper knowledge and concepts of social and emotional learning, that really does ultimately prepare our students for post-secondary. Wouldn't you agree?
I absolutely agree. And believe in many aspects, we were doing this, that, this is what we knew was needed all along. But we've had recently the policy supports and the integration, release of our Regulation 508 for multi-tiered systems has given us an opportunity to wrap some intent, build some real intent into the work. And so I'm really excited about where we're going.
I want to come back to you, Luke. You spoke a little bit about MTSS, and it sounds like everything that you all are doing in Delaware is through that lens, that MTSS lens. Can you speak a little bit about how that's been helpful for your journey and how it may help other states in theirs? So
when we think about college and career readiness, every young person needs to pursue some level of credential, whether that's a post-secondary credential, short or long-term apprenticeship, or a 2-year or 4-year degree. It's incumbent. in terms of how that individual enters the labor market and is able to enter and produce or enter a career that provides a living wage. So in terms of a multi-tiered system of support, we have to build systems that serve every young person. It cannot be a have and a have not. It cannot be a choice model. It needs to exist in the locality or the specific feeder pattern that the young person's family and community experience. So if programming and services does not exist in every corner, we are not creating an access point that is available to every young person and their family. So first and foremost, right, a tier 1 system serves every young person. And as we progress into a multi-tiered system of supports, and as we think about public policy, first and foremost, we need to empower educators, we need to empower families, and we need to empower young people. But we also need to think very differently around how we coordinate services across state and federal programs. So I'll use a particular example. There are, several federal programs that support youth with disabilities and promote transition services. They exist across CTE or Perkins. It exists across IDEA. It exists across WIOA, specifically vocational rehabilitation. There are also supports that exist across our health and social services sectors, particularly for individuals who are blind or visually impaired or have a developmental disability. If you are in a school or you are in a family or in a community school, many of these services are things that exist outside of the school day and are not immediately available to you in terms of your geography or your local network. As kind of systems, individuals or policymakers think about these products and these services, they need to exist where the young person or the family can access them. Multi-tiered systems of support are the way in which we think about our structured delivery model, the way in which we think about policy, and the way in which we think about how to braid resources across many different state and federal programs.
So let's move on a little bit. So Delaware is also known for intentional work around honoring grassroots and community voices, as we've spoken about. How do state leaders involve stakeholders and honor their strengths to make sure that they are active in the developmental phase of policy formation? So I hear you kind of talking about that coaching model and making sure that you've got student voice, you've got the graduate on there, and you're kind of doing some cognitive coaching with them. But can you share any other examples of how you've involved student voice in a recent SEL and/or career and workforce initiative?
Last year's curations were all around resilience. We were focused on emerging better from quarantine. This year, we are celebrating, we're asking youth to submit videos just celebrating how their SEL skills have supported them in coming back into community with others. But more importantly, what is it setting up as we move forward, into what we're hoping is a better, a build back better opportunity. We've started measuring the number of relationships that adults call out with youth, but also that youth call out with adults, so that we can, build those protective factors, build more opportunities to be a listening ear for other folks, whether through surveillance like youth mental health first aid, but also some of the peer support opportunities.
Luke, can you tell us a little bit about how we can utilize youth voice to kind of discuss and inspire us to create tools that can help kids explore future careers?
I'll use an example from our higher education office. We've actually hired a little more than 15 youth to this point who are our youth ambassadors.
Hire them.
These are employees of the department.
Wow.
So there's 15 young people. They are juniors and seniors in high school. They are also freshmen and sophomores in college. And the point is they lead three things. So first and foremost, they lead our communication strategy.
Oh my gosh. First off, that alone is brilliant.
It's really funny, Damien, because essentially when we write, something about the FAFSA or how to essentially build supports around, college access or access to post-secondary education, when we write something technically and then the young person offers us feedback around what will and will not resonate, right, with their peer network or their family network, it's a very different writing style, first and
You
foremost.
become humbled real fast, don't you?
Very quickly, very quickly. So first, they lead our communication strategy. There are a couple different prongs to it. So the first is we do have a really aggressive text messaging campaign. So we're trying to meet, mobile first, meet the young person where the young person is in terms of access to communications and ways in which vehicles with which we communicate.
I think that campaign just pinged your phone.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so from the communications perspective, it's been really fun. So text messaging, direct to peer-to-peer voice, and then to Teri's comments, several mediums of communication through social media and other forms. The second thing we do is we integrate them in terms of our policy work. So where we're conducting outreach, where we're building policy, where we're, again, seeking to build stakeholder voice in more routine practice within the department. So perhaps not a formal committee, but the day in the life of, living and breathing policy. And then really the third thing is, we charge them to be assertive. So what should we be thinking about? What is on the bleeding edge? What is perhaps not on our radar that should be on our radar? And what could be a really big win that is not essentially yet in someone's scope of work. So they are really our innovation.
And it keeps you young, doesn't it?
They're brilliant young people. They're going to go take over the world. And frankly, that's exactly what we want. That is our job. Our job is to help young people take over the world. So, right, and be successful in doing so. So to just give a person a head start, that is all. That's why we got into education. That's why all of us got into education, yes. Right? So why should we not incorporate that into our work life now, even though we're perhaps not in the classroom?
So I can imagine that there are probably a few challenges with coaching them to be a little bit assertive. Can you speak to that a little bit? How is that going? How would you suggest other states overcome that hurdle?
So we have a very clear management structure, and we have that person is also a coach. So we have a very specific onboarding routine where the young person is going through a series of professional learning opportunities. They're learning the role of the department, our relationship with the community and local education agencies. So they're learning a lot about educational policy. They're learning a lot about systems development. They're also learning about effective means of communication and advocacy. And then we essentially integrate them in areas where they want want to have voice and also want to have influence. The other thing that we do, Damien, is we're also looking at their career trajectory. So some of the young people want to move into education. Most of them actually don't in terms of their career arc. So part of our goal is to also create a mentor in the community or in the industry in which the young person wants to transition into. So an example is there's one young woman who's interested in hospitality and tourism in terms of her career arc and trajectory. Well, our work around communication strategy, policy development very much scaffolds into hospitality in terms of a welcoming environment, strategic communications. But we also connected her with a mentor in the industry so that she has kind of both a leg up in terms of her work experience with us, but then also another professional who is coaching her and mentoring her in terms of her career arc.
That sounds extremely innovative, and not only innovative, but really helpful to our young people. One thing that really stood out to me was it doesn't sound like you have, your standard employee orientation. It sounds like a true induction program to ensure that these youth are not only prepared for the job, but they're also thinking about, as you mentioned, systems. They're getting mentored, they're being connected in the community. Is this induction program, is it asynchronous? Is it live? How would you suggest other states think about bringing youth on?
Sure. So it's both synchronous and asynchronous. So essentially, we have these young people for a certain number of hours per week. A portion of that time is collective, meaning we're working together and we're doing group coaching, we're doing group professional learning and development, and shared group discussion. A significant bulk of that time is asynchronous, where the young person is working on certain projects. We have essentially routines, check-ins, coaching models that exist between the mentor and the young person, and there are very clear deliverables. So the way in which kind of we think about this program is very similar to the way that we want to support staff, which is first, it's around personal growth and development. So how do I as an individual want to grow and evolve? Number two, it's about professional growth and development. So how do I as a professional want to move into a career arc or forward my career trajectory? And then number three, it is the balance of those two things that is exceptionally important, the balance of personal growth and professional growth. And that, frankly, is what gives people permission to be themselves. And that is what you want. You want a person to be themselves in a job because you get great ideas. It speaks to retention strategy. And then really number three is the person is happy. And we should be happy in our work.
Yes, that can't be overstated, right?
It cannot be overstated. It's the number one thing that we're really aiming for in terms of our engagement with young people and our engagement with staff is people should show up to work happy, and they should have a healthy balance between personal and professional growth. And we should be speaking to those things routinely in terms of our daily interaction with our peers and colleagues.
Your well-being is not something that you do as a weekend warrior. It is committing to an ongoing daily practice of focusing on your own needs so that you are filled up on a regular basis and able to pour from a full well. To do that, we've really had to shift mindsets around what is, we hear so much about work-life balance. What does it mean to be whole at work? And I think promoting the highest degree or respect of self-love that you can demonstrate.
Now, we've got time for one more question. Luke and Teri, as policymakers, we all prioritize evidence-based approaches. However, the reality is that research on the intentional integration of SEL with career and workforce development is only beginning. It's always important, but especially in this situation, that districts and schools monitor the success of innovations they're developing to ensure they're having desired effects. States can be helpful to districts in providing recommendations, systems, and structures to support the collection and analysis of data that will allow districts and schools to monitor their progress. In addition, we know Delaware is conducting its own pilot. Can you tell us a little bit about the pilot happening in Delaware?
The pilot began with some foundational work that we were doing through the Castle Bridge project, where we had started by crosswalking our SEL competencies with all of the academic content standards, but more specifically with our CTE standards. With that, we developed a toolkit that spotlights how the competencies can be integrated throughout the day in schools, but also in community, in workplaces, ways that young people can use that information and the adults working with them can use that information to bring the competencies to life. And then we had some partners try it out, school districts as well as community-based organizations, because again, for social validity, we wanted to make sure that the tools actually spoke to the needs that young people were having in those environments.
Luke, is there anything you want to add before we close out?
Teri's work is amazing. So just, kudos.
I can tell.
Teri's incredibly humble. It was, Damien, you stated it earlier, but essentially it's okay to not have a strong body of research in this space, provided you can build that into your system design. So there are a series of research questions that we're looking at. We do actually have a grant with IES to, kind of rigorously evaluate our, college and career prep system. And that evaluation is to inform public policy. So frankly, the more tightly we can knit program innovation, research-driven methodology, and then research-informed policy, you have a winner, right? So it's just, even though, perhaps this is perhaps groundbreaking area, you can design feedback loops that strongly inform public policy and move to scale more quickly, right? Evidence-based practices that are truly, captured within a pilot project and the scale of that pilot project. So I think, again, it's not a deterrent, it's just a design consideration in terms of how states and policymakers should be thinking about these things.
So thank you to everybody involved. You all, thank you again. Have a great day.